Hey, morning, guys. So I've got my good friends here, Joel, Muddamalle.
What up?
We got live stream joining us. We've got Metro. What's up? What is up? Make some noise for them. Can you do that? What's up, Metro? So this is a historic moment. I don't know if you guys know this. If you're a guest here, this is and it's your first time. This is great because we got Indian and Pakistani on the same stage.
Unheard of.
Unheard of.
Yeah.
I mean, we are breaking down stereotypes,
Boundaries, barriers.
Yes.
Hatred.
Hatred. What else?
I lost adjectives.
Yeah. Food.
Food?
No.
We love our food.
We love our food.
Yeah.
There's so much curry going on, people. If you smelled something this morning, it's us.
It's but did you light your fragrance?
Did.
Did you do that as a kid? You know, light up the fragrance, the cover. Never mind. We won't talk about. I thought about it later.
That's an Indian thing. We don't do that pagan stuff. We're like, you guys do the whole like many gods thing. We do like one.
Oh,
and
dang.
Yeah, we do one.
Okay.
I don't know what you guys do, but
Many. Positive.
There's so many.
Yeah, I don't, but you know, many.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. So here's the deal. Those of you who are guests, if you don't know, Joel has been with us, and I just want to say that I'm so glad because this is pretty cool. I mean, it's the fact that nowhere in the U.S. can you go and on a Sunday morning have a Pakistani and an Indian on stage together.
Yeah.
In a highly diverse church, multi-campus. It's very, very unique. I mean, the fact is, guys, I mean, I don't know if you guys know this, but I can't even go to India.
Yeah.
Like, I cannot get a visit visa, even though right now I'm a citizen of the U.S.
I would endorse you.
You would, right?
I would, for sure.
Yeah, can you call all of India?
I'm probably related to somebody somehow.
You sure are.
So, we'll see
you
what we
guys
can
marry
do.
cousins, right?
No.
Yeah, you do. Yeah, you do.
Okay. Why do you gotta put all of our business out there?
Sorry.
For everybody.
I'm supposed to introduce you, and then. So, anyways, he's gonna be speaking to us. So we're excited about that. So Joel is gonna introduce himself, but he's a very smart guy. I just want you to know, okay? He's a lot smarter than me. So hey, have some fun with him. So glad you're here, man. Can you make some noise? All campuses, make some noise. Have fun.
Love you, bro. Man, I'm so excited to be here. And what Naeem said is so true. It's unique. It's unique. I love coming here and seeing the diversity and the ethnicity. I mean, it just makes me so excited. So I work for a ministry called Proverbs 31 Ministries. I work for a gal named Lisa Turkers. I serve as director of theology there, so I do a lot of theology and research. Yes, that's right. The baby, like, we love theology. Yes, I love that. And she's also like, you're a dude. How can you work at a women's ministry? We're figuring that out. So but it works. And then I also serve on the teaching team at a church called Transformation Church. Pastor Derwin Gray, Naeem, and I, we're all friends and family. So I love being able to partner locally in ministry. And so we're going to continue on your series. Y'all have been talking about courageous. Right? Like this idea of being courageous. And so, one of the things that I did first, actually, the first thing that you all need to know is the last service. I haven't done this in like a long time. I actually looked at the wrong time. And so the first service, I went 15 minutes in the sermon. Y'all are like, are you going to go again? No, we're going 60 minutes in this sermon because I have to make up for time. No, I'm just kidding, but that did happen. So one of the things that I'm going to be courageous and admit what happened in that first service. What we are going to do is unpack what does it mean to live a life of courage, but particularly in the context of hope, right? And so I went online and I was watching online and I was shook. Like legitimately shook when I saw last week, Naeem came out onto this place with a skateboard. Y'all, anybody here? Anybody? Raise your hand if you're here and you saw this. Okay, listen, I don't know about you. Huh? It was amazing. Okay, thanks for the commentary. Let me go ahead and get to it first though, okay? Like, we're like brothers. Like he could literally be like my older brother. Anyways, so like this is what happened. I am watching online. I took my phone out because I thought he's gonna fall. This is amazing. And so did anybody else get their phone out? Like we're gonna post this. It's gonna go viral. Mosaic is gonna be trending on hashtag Pakistan fell off the board. No? Okay. All right, I cannot believe this. So here's what instantly, I'm a very competitive person. Y'all need to know this. I won't play a game unless I think I can win, Okay, my wife she won't play games with me anymore because I have to win at everything or I won't play the game. And so I'm looking, and instantly I go, well, if he can do it, I can do it. I can do it better, right? That's my motto. And so I go downstairs and I talk to my son. My son is 8 years old, Liam. And I said, son, I need you to go onto YouTube. Hey, man, let's go look at videos. Because I'm like, Naeem did a good job. He did a little, thing and just, that was good. But we're going to do tricks, right? So I need you to go. I've got like 7 days. I need you to go and we're going to learn how to do this. And my son, my 8-year-old son, he looked at me. And then he looked at the iPad, and he looked back at me, and at this one, I'm like, you are not allowed to look at me like that. I look at you like that. You don't look at me like that. This is inappropriate. And he goes, Dada, I think this is a bad idea. A bad idea for what? Do you know who I was in junior high? I'm like, come on, man. I'm like, no, look it up. And so he looks it up. And you want to know something? Out of like the 15 videos that we watched of people doing all these tricks, not one Indian or Pakistani was on the video. So now I'm really shook. I'm like, we've got to do this. And then my son, he's sweating. My son is sweating. And I'm like, so Harry, what's going on? He goes, Dada, you're kind of big. What? Hey, you go to your room right now. You can't say that. I have failed as a parent. How does my mom would be so upset right now? You don't talk back like that. And then I looked at myself and I was like, yeah, I'm kind of big. This might not be a good idea. And so my knee started hurting thinking about it. I was like, I gotta. And then this thing has to go. I was like, this is gonna be hard. And so you know what? God worked in my heart. He worked in my heart. And he said, you know what he said to me? It's like an audible voice. He said, Joey, because when God talks to me, he talks to me like my mom talks to me. I don't know if anybody else has that. No? Okay, cool. So he said, Joey, let Pakistan have this one. And so Naeem is the Pakistani Tony Hawk of skateboarding. Come on, let's give it up for him. Let's give it up for him. Okay? That's courageous. It's courageous. And then something in our week went totally, we were not expecting it. So on Friday, anybody know what happened? Like, what day was Friday? Valentine's Day. Okay, like the 5 people that celebrated are like, Valentine's Day. I'm like, my goodness, this is like a beautiful day. Everybody should be happy about that. All right, Valentine's Day, it's good, right? And so the last time I was here with y'all, my family looked like this. I want to show you a picture of our squad. There you go. And you know the one in the black hoodie with that sweet smile? Yeah, that's the disobedient one. So don't let him trick you. He's still grounded in his room, I think. And so on Friday, we had a Valentine's Day present. So let me introduce you to Amelia Jane. We call her MJ. I did that mostly because of Michael Jordan is the greatest basketball player of all time. I get to say it all the time, and it is amazing. And I'm going to be honest with y'all. I had like this amazing illustration for the beginning. At least I think it was amazing. It was about this ACL reconstruction surgery that I had because I don't know, but if you knew, I played basketball in junior high. I still play a little bit now, but but I tore my ACL. It ruined my career. It really did. I think it impacted my height too, because I was supposed to be 6'4", and then the ACL is a very uncomfortable situation. So, actually, go ahead and show the picture. You guys want to show the picture? Like this is the pic. I was going to do this, and it was going to be amazing. And there's this. Now the guys are all upset at me. You went 15 minutes the first service, and now you're not. There you go. You're like, really? And I just want you to notice something. They put a JM for my initials on my knee. It was ACL reconstruction surgery. Did they think that they were going to put somebody else's leg on my body and walk out? I couldn't believe it. And so that's neither here nor there. You can go back to MJ. Yeah, that's probably a better picture for you guys to see. But ACL going into surgery, like I had to be courageous. That was the point of the illustration, right? And then I realized on Friday, watching my wife give birth to like a child, that this illustration doesn't work anymore. It's not good. It's not a good illustration. There's a better one right here. And so I watched my wife on Friday, and she's a 4-time champion. When I say that, this is our 4th child, right? So she did what MJ didn't even do 4 in a row, right? It's pretty amazing. And I sat back and I watched and I began to think, my goodness, babe, like So she went from contractions, from pain level of 0 to 10. She went from a 0, like her first contractions, to probably like a 15, right, in a matter of like 15 minutes. It was unbelievable. So the pain just skyrocketed. And I'm watching her, and she's just doing this. She's in the zone. She's locked in. I'm terrified. I now have arthritis on my hands, on both hands. I switched because she holds so hard, it hurts. And I'm like, she said, don't share that with everybody. I said, it's okay. I'm going to share it. And I was amazed at her ability to go through the pain. And really what happened when that contraction went from 0 to 15, she actually found herself in crisis, right? Like, you're going to respond one way or another. You're going to do this thing, or you're going to like panic and you're going to try to flee. Like you have to do it in that moment. How do you respond in the midst of crisis? And so I asked her, I said, babe, how did you do this? Like, how did you have the courage to actually go through this process? And she looked at me and she goes, babe, and she had MJ in her hand, and she goes, Emmy. You see, she had a picture, a mental picture, we had some cool ultrasounds as well, of a little baby girl that we had hope for, and anticipation for, and longing for. And so the ability to be courageous in the midst of crisis is directly connected to the sense of hope that she had, and that hope had a face, and that face is now little baby MJ. And I began to think, well, you know what? We all hope in something. Like, we all have different types of hope. And there's a little bit of a scale, right? For instance, when I go home after a long day at work, I am hoping that my Captain Crunch is still there, right? Because these boys, and they're like hounds. They know where I hide it. I don't know how they do this. That's like minuscule, right? But then in honesty. But then you have something that you hope for that is in the context of magnificence, and you say, I hope for a healthy baby. I hope for a safe delivery. You have hope on a particular outcome. I was researching, and there was this Harvard psychologist who said that hope is a psychological necessity. Hope is a psychological necessity. What does that mean? It means we're all doing it. We're all hoping in one sense or another. And so the question today is, what is your hope on? What is that object of your hope? Because all of the things that we hope in will produce a particular outcome. And that outcome will either be satisfaction or suffering. It will be happiness or harm. It will be joy, or you'll find yourself jacked up. What is it that you put your hope in? And if you've been in the church for a while and you've been a Christian maybe, you may feel the Bible answer coming, right? I'll just go ahead and say, yep, I'm going to take out the ace card. I'm going to throw it down right now for all of us. Jesus is the one who is the face. Like, Jesus has a face, and his face is a Middle Eastern man that came onto earth. He left the perfection of heaven and entered into the chaos of earth on behalf of us so that you and I can have hope in a life after this that is with him, where he will restore and reconcile us. And for some of you skeptics, you're like, that's nice, that might preach well, but it don't live well in the midst of my crisis. Because I'm in legitimate pain right now. Things are not going the way that I thought they were going to go. That hope that I had set on this, well, my reality is not the reality of what that hope says that I should have. So how am I supposed to be courageous in my present when it doesn't look like I'm going to achieve the hope that I longed for? And I just want to acknowledge that that's legitimate. That's real. My youngest son, Lucas, he's 5 years old now. At 9 months, 10 months old, it was in October, I won't ever forget the day, we're driving to visit my mom. We share birthdays almost a couple weeks apart. And my baby at the time, he basically started shrieking, and then he went limp in the car seat, and my wife was in the back, and she panicked. And she said, Joe, you have to pull over. And we pulled over and called the ambulance, and he had gone stiff, and half of his body was limp. And from my perspective, it just looked like he was in a total, like he was having a stroke. The hope that I had in that moment, I mean, I imagined myself 10 years, 15 years later, playing full court basketball with all my boys in a pickup game. You know, in that moment, the crisis that I was in made that hope look real far off, and it was a little bit shaky. But you know what I had in that moment as I held my baby waiting for the ambulance to come? I had the assurance, not that everything was going to be okay, because I didn't know, but the assurance that I did have was that in some untangible way, I can't even describe it, the presence of the living Son Jesus, the Spirit of God was inside of me giving me comfort, saying, regardless of the outcome, I'm going to be with you. That is the promise of his presence. We later find out that he actually has this thing called febrile seizures, right? It's induced by high fevers. And so it's amazing what happens when you can say all day long, my hope is in Jesus, my hope is in Jesus. And then you have a crisis and you have a baby who's having a seizure. And then you really say, is my hope really in Jesus? Because in my crisis, I am fearful. And let me just acknowledge that. When it comes to courageous hope, we have to recognize that fear is actually okay. I don't know if you've ever heard anybody tell you that, but I just want to let you know that the human experience of fear, that's okay. You see, we could never actually experience and show courage without the absence of crisis. It's in the midst of crisis that we can be a courageous people. And crisis requires the experience often of fear. And when it comes to how we relate that with Jesus, the fear for us, in my mind, here's my fear, holding my baby, Lucas, at 9 months old, that maybe Jesus is not enough. Maybe Jesus is not enough. And then in an instant, I'm met with my faith that says, no, Jesus is more than enough. And in between those two questions lies a tension that you and I live in. And so this is so important. This doesn't mean that there's an absence of fear, rather that in the midst of our fear, we respond with courage because our faith is in the truly courageous one, Jesus himself. And I think what we will actually find in our lives, particularly when it comes to courage and hope and faith, right, is this pattern. And Pastor Naeem, he actually did a sermon on courageous faith. If you haven't seen it, I want you to go and watch it on the YouTube channel or on the podcast, whatever it might be, because this sermon, you cannot separate hope and faith. Those two things are connected at the hip. They work and function together. In fact, the writer of Hebrews, in Hebrews 11:1, this is what he says. He says, now faith is the assurance of things what? Hoped for the conviction of things not seen. You see how those two things work together? And what we find in our lives is typically this pattern. Let me just present it. We'll find a promise. We'll find, wow, that promise looks kind of good, right? I think I can hope in the outcome of this promise. And then in that instant, we feel a little bit courageous. I've got a bit of courage because now I can be hopeful for this thing that has been promised. And then we hit crisis. And when we hit crisis, we are going to respond in a particular way. And the experience of fear isn't the dead end. It shouldn't be for the believer, because in the presence of fear, we now put our hope in faith in Christ. And this isn't a linear A plus B equals C, and then we're done and we get to move on with our Christian life. Wouldn't it be nice if that's what it was? I could just check it off. Y'all any checklists people in here, right? Can I just check off the suffering, and let me just go ahead and check off the faith and the courage one, and it's in my back pocket. I got it. I'm good. But that's not reality. In fact, I think this is more circular. At the very end of it, there is a rinse, repeat, wash. I messed that one up. What is it? Wash, rinse, repeat, right? So in India, we don't have these kinds of sayings, just so you know. But isn't that true? It's this sense that you're going to experience it. If you've got your Bibles, I want you to turn to Genesis chapter 12. If you've got your iPhones, it's basically going to do it by yourself. If you've got an Android device, go ahead and just be careful. Make sure there's not anybody to your right or left. Just give it a 10-second countdown. Make sure it don't go boop. Right? Okay, I'm sorry. Shouldn't do that. Go ahead and turn to Genesis chapter 12. I was captivated, totally captivated by this passage, particularly the life of Abraham. Here's one of the reasons why I love Abraham. Because the promise that God makes to Abraham in Genesis chapter 12, let's just go ahead and jump there. I want to read this to you. This is what God says to Abraham before God changes his name to Abraham. His name is Abram. That's why you're going to hear me say Abram. Now the Lord said to Abram, go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land I will show you. Curious, has Abram jumped on a Google Maps or Apple Maps and been like, let me go ahead and hit that geographic location view and see what this looks like? Anybody? Nah. He has to imagine this promise that God has given him of this land that is foreign to him. And this is what God says, and I will make of you a great nation. I will bless you and make your name great so that you will be a blessing. Notice that God's going to lift him up and make him great, not for his own sake, but for the sake of others so that he would be a blessing. And this is why I think every one of us in this room should be so grateful for the faith of Abraham. Here's why. And God says, I will bless those who bless you, and him who dishonors you I will curse, and in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed. That Hebrew word families is goyim, which means ethnicities or nations. In the Greek, it means ethnos, which is exactly what happens in Acts chapter 2. Do you see what just takes place here? God promises that through Abraham, through his obedience, that he would form a multi-ethnic, multi-generational, multicultural family. How is it possible? That we joke about Pakistan and India, but behind the joking is an honest trauma. Behind the joking is a real history of a nation divided. Imagine if the United States actually, at the end of the Civil War, goes, yo, we're good, we're going to just separate and be done. That's what happened. They're like, we're done. Can you imagine that the promise that God gives to Abraham centuries ago is to reconcile two brothers back to each other, to reconcile people of different ethnicities together? This is the hope of the gospel. This is what we long for. And then verse 4, thank God for verse 4. So Abram went. My man has some faith. My man's got some courage. Why? Because he hoped in the promise that God had given him. And then we have this narrative. He goes, he does some stuff, he goes to the land, and then he gets to verse 10. Now, I know I'm Indian, and typically Indians are supposed to be really good at math. I'm not. It's really to the demise of my mother. My mother's very sad about this. Here's the good news. It skipped a generation. And so Liam is actually in like 8th grade math, and he's in 2nd grade. So my mom just talks about that. I'm just like, Mom, it's okay. All your disappointment, just put it on to... We're not recording this, are we? Oh, we are. Oh, gosh. This is the live stream one. Love you, Mom. We're in counseling for some of this stuff. So it's okay. So I need some help. So 10 minus 4, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6. That's actually how I have to do math. 6 verses from verse 4 to verse 10. And now let's just jump to verse 10. Now there was a famine in the land, so Abram went down to Egypt. I just want to let y'all know through the arc of the biblical story that every time people find themselves in Egypt, this is not something negative against Egyptians or anything like that, okay? That's not what I'm saying. But what I am showing is a historical point in the biblical story that every time the people of God find themselves in a foreign territory, particularly in Egypt, things don't go well for them. It just doesn't. They're a superpower. They're about to destroy some people. They're about to kill some people. They're about to kill the people of God. They're going to enslave them. Egypt is not a great place for the people of God. And let me just present a metaphor for what Egypt is. Abram goes from, let's just follow that train of thought that we just presented, promise, right? He got a promise. He had hope in the promise. He had courage in the sense that I think this thing can work out. And then in verse 10, he experiences his crisis. And his crisis is there's this famine in this land. But this is where things get a little crazy, okay? Because then in verse 11 it says he's about to enter Egypt, and then he looks to his wife Sarah, and I'm just going to give you my commentary at this point. This is Joel's translation. He looks over at his wife, and he goes, yo, girl, you fine. And then he looks around, and he's like, yo, there's a lot of Egyptian dudes out here. And then he looks back at his wife, he's like, you real fine. They're going to murder me. Right? Like every guy, if you just want, you're trying to get, just go ahead and say that to your wife. It'll go very well for you, I promise. Right? Valentine's Day just happened. This is Abram's, so his crisis is two things. His crisis is a famine. He finds himself in Egypt, and now he's like, I'm married so high up that I'm going to die because of you. Thank you, my beautiful wife. I appreciate this. Right? He is fearful. He's terrified. What would have happened? Here's what I think God's expectation is of Moses. And this is how I think in my brain about God. Yo, homie. That's what I think. I grew up in Chicago. Yo, homie, didn't I give you a promise? Didn't I take you out of the land? Didn't I give you courage? I got you. But Abram responds in fear, and he doesn't allow his faith to step in. And when he responds in fear, what he actually does is he tells Sarah, who's now complicit in it, and Sarah's probably on this side looking like, I'm fine. You not? Yeah, I'm doing this for him, right? You see how that works its way out? And Abram goes into Egypt, and sure enough, Pharaoh's like, oh, that's your sister? Cool. Go ahead and come and hang out with me. And that's what happens. And then God sends a plague. This is one of the reasons why I really believe in the validity of Scripture. Because if I'm the editor of the Bible, I'm like, this is rough. Let me just go ahead and get that whiteout. Do y'all remember whiteout? Wow, I just dated myself. Whiteout. I mean, we're trying to hit the delete button here. This is not, but it's present in the text. Why? It's evidence that God, even in the midst of people's fear, God will act faithful. It's in his character. It's in his nature. And so he acts faithful towards Abraham, and he actually sends a plague. And then Pharaoh's like, what happened? Abram, why'd you do this? Abram's like, dude, I thought you were going to kill me. And so Abram leaves that place in Egypt more wealthy than he ever came in. Here's what I think, I just want to pause. Here's what I think is so important. When we experience God's goodness, when we experience God's faithfulness, we have to take those moments, and just like Mary in the New Testament, we have to hold those thoughts captive and place them in the chambers of our heart so deep inside and recall them on a regular basis. I am terrified that we live in a culture of amnesia. We live in a forgetful culture. We're not happy. We're not satisfied. We're only as good as our last experience. We're only as good as our last success. We're only as good as our last... Man, I think the last thing was good enough. And what Abram does here, I think we'll find evidence of, is he takes God's faithfulness for granted because he experiences it, and then he moves on and he leaves it behind him. And this is so, so dangerous. What can we learn from Abram? What can we learn from this experience? I just want to present three things. Three big ideas. One, that you and I can live with a courageous hope because our courage is based on God's past faithfulness. This is where Abram, things go sideways for him, okay? Because if you just flip your Bible a couple pages, I couldn't do the math. It's a lot of verses between 12 and chapter 20. That was way too many, so I was like, I'm not going to do that. I'll still be counting right now. In chapter 20, it's crazy. You see the repetitive history of Abram. He meets a guy named Abimelech. And you know what happens? He's like, Sarah, you fine. Uh-oh. But don't you and I find ourselves in similar patterns? You see, Abram found himself in a different type of Egypt. And at this point, we're like, Joel, I am never going to Egypt. I don't have an Egypt. I don't even know where Egypt is on my map. This is a non-issue for me. And let me just suggest, you're right. You maybe don't have it. And if you are Egyptian, I love y'all, okay? Like, Egyptian food is so good. But if Egypt is a metaphor, let me just suggest a metaphor for you. You might not have an Egypt, but you sure do got a Netflix. You sure do have a relationship that you elevated all the way up here. You sure do might have a drink that you have that's just for fun. You sure might be going out, hanging out, doing some things that you just don't want other people to know about. You see, all of those things are objects of hope that you've thought would provide satisfaction for you, but you leave those things, you leave Egypt in a world of hurt because they'll never satisfy you. Egypt could never satisfy Abram. He had to leave there. He wasn't supposed to go back. But somehow we find ourselves going back to Egypt and putting ourselves in a world of hurt. This is what the author of Hebrews says in Hebrews chapter 3. What Abram should have done in Genesis 20 is gone back and said, you know what? Girl, you fine, but God, he's got us. So let's act and walk in faith. This is what the writer of Hebrews says in chapter 3. Therefore, holy brothers and sisters, who share in a heavenly calling, parentheses, hope. What do we share in? What do we long for? This heavenly calling. And then he says this, consider Jesus, the apostle and high priest of our confession. He was faithful to the one who appointed him, just as Moses was in all God's household. For Jesus is considered worthy of more glory than Moses, just as the builder has more honor than the house. Now every house is built by someone, but the one who built everything is God. Moses was faithful as a servant in all God's household and as a testimony to what would be said in the future. But Christ was faithful as a son over his household. And we, you and I, this multi-ethnic family of God, are that household if we hold on to our confidence and the hope in which we boast. Here's another shocking reality of God's goodness and faithfulness. Hebrews chapter 11, verse 8. By faith, Abraham obeyed when he was called to go out to a place that he was to receive as an inheritance, and he went out not knowing where he was going. This is written after multiple epic fails from Abraham. Who is the God that we serve? The God who is faithful in the midst of our fear. Who is the God that we serve? The God who is merciful beyond measure. Who is the God that we serve? The God who left heaven to come to earth on the greatest rescue mission ever? Why can we be courageous? Because of what God has done in Christ Jesus. When Jesus leaves heaven and comes to earth, he comes in humanity but still full divinity. And when he enters into Jerusalem in the New Testament, the Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, the Synoptic Gospels, they cover this. He rides in on a donkey, and all the people are going wild right now. Like, anybody watch the All-Star Dunk competition last night? Anybody? Like 4 people? Okay, thanks, y'all. Like, it was crazy. These dudes are doing, like, it's probably the greatest dunk competition since, I think it was like 86 or 89, MJ and Dominique Wilkins. Like, it was that crazy. And people are losing their minds. Like, literally, the judges are getting up, walking away. This was the hype when Jesus walks into Jerusalem times 50,000. They are ready for the conquering king to come and rescue them from their Egypt, Rome. And yet Jesus comes on a donkey, which in the New Testament and in the ancient Mesopotamian era was a symbol of peace. You see, if Jesus wanted to come in as a victorious king, he's jumping on that white stallion. But he comes in on a donkey? It's a sign of peace. It's an indication of what he is going to produce for the people. The people want immediate peace. Jesus says, nah, I got to give you eternal peace first. Jesus walks in and he goes to the Garden of Gethsemane and he prays. Can you imagine what he knows is going to happen? He knows it. And he goes and he prays and says, Lord, if it's your will, let this cup pass from me. In the midst of that fear, like the cross is agonizing. And yet Jesus is faithful as a son and willingly takes step by step by step to the cross. Why? Because it is on the cross that Jesus conquers sin, overcomes death, and disarms the evil powers for good. And so now you and I, we live in an already but not yet. The already of Christ's victory and the not yet of when he will come back and he will right all the things that are wrong. We can have courage because of Jesus and what he has done in the past. Point 2, our hope is based on the assurance of a future that God has promised. This is what the beloved disciple of Jesus, John, says in John 16:33. I've told you these things so that in me you may have peace. Just talked about it. We long for peace. I'm so tired of Twitter. Like, I'm going to block myself from Twitter. Can you do that? I'm going to block myself from Twitter. This is horrible, right? Like, I don't want to keep doing this. We want peace. We're done with the strife. Like, can people just say nice things and just stop? But then notice the very next verse. Like, John, really? This is another one of those whiteout moments. Like, just leave it alone. No, here it is. And you will have suffering in the world. Let me read that together. I've told you these things so that in me you may have peace. Period. He doesn't even give us a nice transition. The next one, you will suffer in this world. And then he says, be courageous. I have conquered the world. This is Jesus talking. Oh, again, this life is not absent of suffering, but life in the presence of suffering is livable, bearable, and in fact, we can be courageous because Jesus himself has overcome the world, so he gives us his peace. And the thing that we long for, the thing that is so much better is what happens in Revelation 21, 3-4. A little bit of debate on which John this is. I actually think this is John, the same beloved disciple of Jesus. So this is what I think. John says this. Then I heard a loud voice from the throne. Look, God's dwelling is with humanity. Y'all, from Genesis 1 and 2 on through Revelation 21, God wants to be with his people. He wants to be present with his people. That's his purpose. That's his plan. So you want to know the great story of Scripture? God trying to be with his people. God's dwelling is with humanity, and he will live with them. They will be his people, and God himself will be with them and will be their God. And this is what I think we're all longing for. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes. Are you in crisis? Are you devastated? Do you feel like there's just destruction all around you? This is the hope that we have. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes. Death will be no more. Grief, crying, and pain will be no more because the previous things have passed away. My goodness, what a glorious hope we have in Christ. And then number 3, we live with a courageous hope because of God's past faithfulness, which is an indication and assurance that he will remain faithful today, tomorrow, and into eternity. We just see story after story after story of the people of God acting in faithless ways and God remaining faithful in all his ways. Oh my goodness, what a hope. And this is what Paul says in 2 Corinthians 5, 6 and 8. So we're always of good courage. Pay attention to that word, phrase. We are always of good courage. We know that while we're at home in the body, we're away from the Lord, for we walk by faith, not by sight. Yes, we're of good courage, and we would rather be away from the body and at home with the Lord. There's this tension that Paul is getting at, and he's saying, yeah, man, it would be so good to be with the Lord, but there's a purpose for us right now, here in the present. What is that purpose? 2 Corinthians chapter 5, the ministry of reconciliation. That God would use us as ambassadors of Christ. That Christ would make his appeal to the nations in and through us to reconcile a broken world. That is what he is getting at. But notice he says this, so we're always of good courage. Here's what I'm a little bit worried about. Remember earlier we talked about this? We have this sense that this checklist faith that I had a couple days ago, a couple hours ago, a couple years ago, maybe a couple decades ago, that's good enough. That will sustain me. I love doing fires with my boys, right? As a dad, anyway, you just do fires, right? Now, I got one, That's my guy right here. Listen, I am also a bit of a knucklehead, and like anybody do like Boy Scouts, Eagles? They teach you safety? I don't have any of that. I grew up in Chicago. We just survived, right? It's all survival. So we're like out there, like building a fire, and my son's like, Liam, he's the know-it-all. Liam is a know-it-all. He knows everything because he's always on YouTube learning everything. And he's like, Dad, there's a way to do the fire. I'm like, no, don't worry about it, dude. I got this. Look at this. Gasoline for the lawnmower. We good. Now, I do this all the time when my wife's inside the house doing stuff, right? So, because I know I can hear her. She's probably talking to me right now. I got a Facebook message. Okay. And I grabbed the gasoline. I got this, dude. Watch this. And we put it on, and I was safe. Just everybody take 3 steps back. Safety first. Gasoline. And here's the problem. I should have probably taken a match and lit it and then done it, but I had like that long, and I thought the long thing would be good enough. No. I'm darker today because of what took place right there. So I reached over, and then it went. Oh, it was awesome. It was so cool. And the boys were like, yeah, Dad's on fire. I wasn't really on fire, but it felt like it. I had a tan, and Indians can't have tans. And it was very uncomfortable. So, and here's what's worse. There's the fire was great. Like, bam, it went, and then it was gone. It's like, what happened? How could you have so much fire? How could you have so much fire and the logs not catch on fire? So my son, the know-it-all, he comes to me. Hey, Dad? Like, yeah, he's got an iPad. I'm like, how do we have Wi-Fi all the way out here? LTE. I'm like, I'm turning that off as soon as I get back inside. LTE, he plays a video. It's like, I watched this. This is unbelievable. I'm like, there's a strategy. You actually pick little twigs and little leaves, and you built the foundation, and you go, like, anybody watch Survivor? You saw and they're doing all the things to make the fire. And here's what's unbelievable. That thing lit. It took a while. It took a lot of hard work and preparation, but that fire kept going. Here's what I'm terrified of, that we live as if the fumes of our past faith will sustain us in the midst of future crisis. It won't. This is what Paul is getting at right here. So always be of good courage. Man, be stoking that fire always. How do we stoke that fire? Oh, remember God's faithfulness over here? That's a log. Grab it, stick it in the fire. Oh, remember God was merciful over here? Grab that, stick it into that fire, man. Build that thing up. Stoke that bad boy good. Oh, remember when you experienced devastation and everything was falling apart? And in fact, it did. It did fall apart. There's no happy ending at the end of it. This is not like Grey's Anatomy, where Dr. Missteamy or McDreamy, or who is this guy? He always shows up, and my wife's so happy every time. I'm like, stop, you shouldn't be so happy. Every time this guy goes, like, stop, right? Listen, it was bad. It turned out bad, okay? It turned out bad. Take that and see God's faithfulness of his presence in the midst of your suffering, where he was with you. And him being with you was just his intangible, but then the people of God that came around you, that loved you, that took care of you, grab that and stick that in the fire. This is how we can be a people of good courage. 2 Corinthians 1:10. Paul says, and he's speaking personally about what he had experienced, but I think we can all say this about him, about God, about Jesus. He says and he's talking about Jesus. He delivered us from such a deadly peril. I mean, this dude, Paul, was shipwrecked and beaten and bit by snakes, and I hate snakes. And I mean, it's like all the horrible things. And he says, he delivered us from such a deadly peril, that's past, and he will deliver us, that's present. And on him we set our hope that he will deliver us again, that's future. You see that? God's past faithfulness is an indication that he will be present in the midst of our current suffering and pain and joy and all the good things. And that is an indication that he will continue to remain faithful. And because of who God is, you and I can go back onto that list and we can say, yes, God has given us a promise. Yes, we can be courageous in light of that promise. Yes, in the midst of that crisis, I will experience fear. But when I experience that fear, I will go ahead and take my faith and take that fire and all the things that we've stoked up in there, and I will remember that Jesus has overcome the world. And so in the midst of my fear, I will be courageous because I know my hope is not in my ability, but in what Christ has done. How do we be a courageous people? That's how. And I just can't help but think maybe some of the people in here live streaming on the different campus, y'all been coming here weeks, months maybe, years maybe, and you're skeptics, right? Like, that's okay. That's okay. But in the same way that we can't live in fear, in the same way we cannot live in fear, this is what the gospel is calling us to respond in faith. And the hope that I have personally experienced, the hope that so many in here can testify to, is the hope of Jesus. Let's stand, let's pray. Lord, we put all of our hope and all of our faith in you. God, we can be courageous today. We can live with hope. We can live with anticipation for a future that you've promised us. Not because we know we can do something, but because we know that you have done everything. So, Lord, I just pray that we would experience a bold, courageous hope that is formed in faith, and that the object of our hope and faith, he has a face, he has a name, his name is Jesus. We put all of our trust in him. Amen.